And we're live.
Woohoo.
Quite exciting. All right. We're live, but we have 0 viewers, which makes me frightened. But it does say we're live, so I guess that's good. There it says 9 waiting. We're live, but we have 0 viewers. Okay, no, there's the echo. Awesome. So, covering thousands of miles between us. How's the weather up there, both of you?
Here I think it's cloudy today. Yesterday, actually, we got some sunshine. Yesterday was nice, but it's still cold though. It's not sunny warm. It's like sunny. You need to wear a jacket and a hat type of stuff. But I did have a neighbor who mowed his grass on over the weekend, so it was sunny enough over the weekend that they could actually start the yard work for the year,
Nice.
which I am not looking forward to.
Yeah.
All right,
Excellent.
sunny over here in Bristol, UK as well. Sunny enough for my kids to get out on the trampoline for the first time of the year, so everyone's feeling happy about that.
Excellent. All right, well, now we have 65 viewers, so there we go. All right, so we have Dan and Steve on to give us an update about Blazor. We also have time constraint, so Dan, you need to wrap up at 10, what time?
Yeah, sometime before, like within an hour. We can do a normal show. Normal show.
Okay. All right. So so I guess we'll just we'll get started quickly. So I'm going to do the community links. We'll begin with the screen sharing. Awesome. Okay, so the first post we've got is from talking.net. This is I've kind of scrolled actually to 2/3 of the way through the post, but what they've got here is showing this is the experience you get. This is uploading with an Angular 5 and ASP.NET Core app, and they're showing they've also integrated with the Angular progress API there. So that's kind of nice. You see the upload progress. So here we go with the upload browse, and we get the percentage counting up. And of course, you could do other things like a progress bar or whatever. So here they're showing how they've done that. This is going through implementing the relatively standard with the upload API, and then showing the Angular code on the front end to connect to that. So kind of cool just to see that wired up. This is. Oh,
is that using the latest Angular templates for ASP.NET Core? Is that using the spot templates?
You know, I don't know.
It's Angular 5.
It's definitely using the SPA templates, but whether it's the latest one or not, I can't tell.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, it's I didn't see in there where it said how it was created. So, yeah. All right. Cool. So this is from David Barry, and he's talking about implementing HateOS or hypertext of the engine of application state or HateOS.
Is that a new OS version? A new distro?
It should be. It should be a new Linux distro where it just like. Yeah. I don't know. That's how I read it.
I hear actually these days that it's just you're just supposed to say hypermedia. That it's just hypermedia. The HateOS or HateOS.
Because there was also HAL for a while, right? Too.
Well, that was a specific protocol, specific format of an example of a hypermedia based API. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say HateOS now.
I think it's pretty straightforward. That's what it is. It hates you. So this is an application, and so my understanding, and please correct me, but this is kind of like there's REST, and REST is kind of a generic, pretty general thing. It's using HTTP as kind of how you're navigating through your APIs, and then this is kind of more of a prescriptive implementation of that. So here's a sample project. David spent a Saturday going through and implementing this with ASP.NET Core, a web API, and talked about he's using AutoMapper. He also talked about kind of how he set up his URL resolving and stuff like that. So
very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, and looking for feedback too. So if you've got feedback, send it over to him. The folks over at Zabril have built out a health check. So this is a health check library for ASP.NET Core. Has things like backend, can report and save health check information. So looks pretty interesting. So this is out on GitHub. And of course, like every week, we'll share these links at the end, and they'll be in the notes as well. Okay, Matt Milliken, pretty quick post here, but he's talking about he was building out, he's hobby project, he's building a railroad hobby project, and he wanted to use an API, and he ended up using scaffolding to build out his API. So he's just showing quickly how he did that. And in this case, it looks like basically using scaffolding to create the API and not necessarily using the back end that he used to scaffold it.
It's like model railroads.
It is.
That's cool. Does he have a picture? Where's the
no
where's
picture
the
yet? No, what? I know. Where's the railroads? Yeah, so maybe we'll keep an eye. So Matt, let us know if you build more of this. We'd love to see pictures of railroads on here.
Controlled by ASP.NET Core.
Controlled by ASP.NET Core, maybe some Raspberry Pis, and it should be animated GIFs of the trains going around the track and stuff. So David Fowler tweeted this out. This is Project Bedrock update. So this is kind of, so Bedrock is kind of the pulling the abstractions from the Kestrel and performance related work and pulling that to a reusable kind of API that other people can use as well. And so this is kind of talking about, this is an update on where they're at. So cool.
That's cool.
Nate McMaster. So we talked about this just last time. Here's an update. So this is .NET Serve. This is a quick, it'll serve all files in a folder. And so what he's done with this is he's added in also, it's a global tool here. And so what he's added in since then is Razor. So this is Razor Pages support. So, you know, throw a folder of HTML and now Razor Pages and just serve it up. So
it's got open browser. Oh, I want open browser.
You want open browser? Oh, right.
I want to be able to .NET run from the command line and have it pop the browser for me. That's great. Good, good job, Nate. I applaud you.
Neat stuff. So, and he's continuing to add stuff in here. I'm keeping an eye on it. Andrew Locke, a global tool on implementing tiny PNG API. So this is a common task. You need to minify your PNGs, and so here he's gone through and set that up. So yeah, using the tiny PNG API here, and showing examples of squishing down images and the how it works and stuff.
I want like a global tool catalog. Is there a catalog yet?
Oh, I'm not aware of one. That's a great idea.
I mean, the global tool stuff in 2.1 is hot.
It really is.
All the cool global tools that people are publishing to NuGet that you can now just use .NET, install the tool from the command line, and use it. Like we should have maybe NuGet could have like a way of searching for them all. Like show me.
Yeah, like a tag or something, right? Like cool. All right. So the folks over at Six Labors, this is Image Sharp, and they've noticed people are building out middleware using Image Sharp, and so this is actually middleware that they've built out. So this is pretty neat. This is an image library, the Image Sharp graphics library, and then they've built out middleware for it. So this is pretty neat, and as they've called out, the Orchard project uses this as well. So
nice,
good stuff. Yeah. Six Labors is really cool. They've got the Image Sharp is kind of their main thing, but they've built out several other things as well.
And are they cross-plat? Is Image Sharp work on other OSs?
I believe yes. Yeah. See here, they've got their builds working on Linux and Mac.
Linux and Mac. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, very very cool stuff. So and then the last one here. This is Blazor related. I forget his name here. So Greg has built, this is nice. He's got a series, .NET Concept of the Week. This is episode 9, and this was from March. And here he's kind of done I think it's, 15 minutes, where he kind of goes in depth into Blazor. And so this is starting with, way at the beginning, he does like a compiling, he talks over fundamentals, and he actually builds out like some using mscripten from the command line, showing kind of how it works and some basic stuff. Then digs into showing using things like browser tools, how Blazor's working, and then kind of builds out some more complex stuff, including to-do app and stuff. So I thought that was really cool to see the community kind of going in and starting to build this stuff.
That one's amazing.
It is, huh? That's it. That's all my that's my links of the week.
Thanks, Greg, for putting that post up. That's great.
All right. What do you got?
Me? Well, we were going to talk about Blazor. We shipped our first release of Blazor, our first preview. Blazor 0.1 is now public and available for people to try it. I should share my screen. Let me show some stuff. What do I do here? Yes, I click this. Show everything. Oh, the Matrix. Okay. Can you see?
That was amazing. Yes.
You can see. Okay. So yeah, this is the blog post that went out a little over a week ago. I think a little over a week ago. And yeah, there are preview bits of Blazor that you can now download and install. I mean, we've had prototypes of Blazor kicking around for a little while, but this is the official thing, like the first part of our experiment to enable everyone to try out .NET in the browser. If you haven't heard about Blazor yet, you're a little late to the game. That's fine. Blazor is our new web UI framework that works in the browser with .NET and WebAssembly. It's .NET in the browser, write your single page applications with C#. So yeah, there's a blog post here that tells you all about it and how you can get the bits. So if you want to get set up with Blazor on your own machine, you should. What you want to do is you're going to want to get the .NET Core 2.1 Preview 1 SDK. You're specifically going to want the Preview 1 SDK. So that'll take you to here, and you'll want to grab the SDK for your platform of choice. So you'll need that. That's the minimum so that you can just create Blazor apps and build them and run them. But of course, you're probably going to want the tooling as well. So to get the tooling, you're going to need the latest preview version of Visual Studio. So you'll need the preview channel that you can get from visualstudio.com/vs/preview. So install this. That will give you the infrastructure that we need to enable the Blazor tooling. And then on top of that, you should install our Blazor language service, which is just a v6 that you can get off of the Visual Studio marketplace. Now, I know some folks, like that's a lot of preview bits. I know some people feel some angst about installing preview bits, but all of these preview bits install cleanly side by side with all the stable releases. So the SDK, that will just be another separate SDK folder on your machine. Your 2.0 SDK is there. It's fine. It's untouched. With Visual Studio, you can install the preview version of Visual Studio next to your stable version of Visual Studio, and they will both work happily together. I know some people still don't believe that. So just to show this, like this is my machine. Currently, I used to actually have 4 versions of VS. I now just have 3, but I've got stable. I've got the preview channel, 15.7 preview 2, I think is the latest, just came out a little while ago. I've even got some like crazy internal preview build of Visual Studio that I haven't updated, as you can see in a while. It's still back at 15.6, and I've never had any problems with this. It works great. So install it, it'll be fine. I know from days of yore installing a preview version of VS, you felt like you had to repave your machine. But with the new Visual Studio installer, it actually works really, really well. So I strongly recommend doing that. And you're going to want the Visual Studio tooling if you're on Windows. So the experience is pretty nice.
I want to second what you're saying. I've done this on my work machine. I've done this on my work laptop. I'm using these constantly. They are side by side. It's like, so it is not the old days, like you're saying. You really can install side by side multiple versions of Visual Studio, and it's not a big deal. And
if you're still super paranoid, there are Visual Studio Preview VMs on Azure that you can just grab a already installed and set up Visual Studio Preview installation, and then you can add the like the Blazor language service on top and the right .NET Core SDK. So if you really want to do it in a separate VM, you can. But honestly, I think this works really great. So that's how you get set up. That's how you get the bits. And then if you read the blog post, like it's got a whole bunch of instructions on how you can get up and going with Blazor. I unfortunately need to emphasize again that this is still an experiment. This is not a supported product, so don't go building your next internal company critical line of business app on this quite yet. The reason why we are shipping these bits to you is so that you can kick the tires with Blazor. Let us know what you think about the direction that we're taking with the programming model. What you think about how .NET is working in the browser in general, and also so we can gauge the amount of interest. So the more people that install, the more people that the the more likely it is, honestly, that we will then take it to be something that will be product. So please do install it and use it and let us know what you think. John, have you installed Blazor on your machine?
I certainly have.
You have? Oh, see?
Yeah.
Exactly. See, John did it. Even John did it.
Even I did it. It seriously, it wasn't a big deal. I clicked through the links on your thing. It's the latest Visual Studio, which I run anyhow. I always run the latest, but I have the same as you. I have multiple builds, and then the V6, and it was like boom, 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 done. And so yeah, it's not a big deal. It was super
fantastic.
easy.
So I've done these steps, of course, on my machine. You can see I've already got the Blazor language services installed. This is the preview version of Visual Studio. And then when you want to create your first Blazor app, super simple. You're going to file new project. You're going to want to create, and it's part of the ASP.NET umbrella. So ASP.NET Core web app is what you're going to want to create. And then you'll see our templates. So there's 2 templates here. There's the standalone Blazor template. That's basically like Blazor is a bunch of static files, and you can publish them as static files to GitHub pages or to FTP to whatever server you'd like. But of course, one of the really exciting things about Blazor is full stack .NET development, where not only are you using C# and .NET in the browser, but you also are using it on the server. In this case, ASP.NET Core. So we have a template that also sets up a multi-project solution where you have the server project with ASP.NET Core and some web APIs, and your client project with Blazor that talks to it, and even a shared .NET Standard class library that you can use to share code between the two. But to get going with the easy, simplest thing, I'm going to do the standalone app. So click OK. That will go ahead and create your template, and then let of course the package restore just do its thing. And we'll just go ahead and run it. Now, when you run this, you're going to want to Control F5, like run without the debugger. And there's a couple reasons for that. One reason is that, well, first of all, the debugger is not going to do you any good with your Blazor app yet. We don't yet have debugging support set up for Blazor. It didn't make it for this release. We're hard at work on it with the mono folks. We hope to have it soon, but it's not there at this time. So you're going to want to Control F5 just to avoid doing something that's not going to do you any good anyway. Second, also, there seem to be some issues, like particularly with Chrome. Like when you're using the debugger with Chrome, the script debugging stuff in Visual Studio will treat the WebAssembly file as like several thousand WebAssembly functions, and it tends to sort of bog things down. So Control F5 is your friend. To build and run, just Control F5 for now. And then in the future, we will, of course, slide up debugging. This is just the first preview release of Blazor. It's just a 0.1. But this should look like every Blazor app that you've probably seen in a demo so far. We've got the counter page where you can click a button and it updates the page without a page refresh. And every time you're clicking, you're calling C# and .NET. There's no JavaScript being used there. And then for the weather forecast page, this is actually issuing an HTTP client request to the server, pulling down some JSON data, and then using Razor to dynamically generate this table based off of that data. So that's how you can do it from VS. If you're on a Mac or you're on Linux, we do also have CLI-based templates, so you can use .NET New to create your Blazor app. So if I want to go to my desktop, I think so. The first thing you're going to do is like .NET New -I. -I means install. That allows you to install template packs. And then the template that you want it's actually pretty easy to remember. It's Microsoft ASP.NET Core .blazor with an O, Blazor templates. I know, shocking package ID. Okay, and so you hit enter on that, and that will install the Blazor templates for you. And I've already done that. So if I look at .NET News help output, I should see Blazor and Blazor hosted. Yeah, they're right there. Okay. So now I should be able to do .NET New Blazor. So I can do .NET New Blazor -O, and let's create, I don't know, Blazor app 1 for the folder. And that will literally create for you the same template that we just saw. If I go into that folder in .NET Run, that should start up a little development host to host our Blazor app. And we should get the URL. There it goes. Okay, great. So this is the URL of the app, and I should be able to now go over here, and we'll see the same thing loaded up in Edge. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's if you're on Mac or Linux, you can get going with a command line and your favorite text editor of choice. We don't yet have Blazor tooling available for non-Windows OS. Like we only have Blazor tooling enabled currently for Visual Studio on Windows. And by tooling, I mean like the really fancy Razor editing support with like IntelliSense and completions. But we are working on that. And I'll talk more about our roadmap in a little bit. Okay, but that's just getting started from the console.
I got a super quick question as you were doing both of those. The little loading thing that comes up in the corner as it's loading, is that customizable easily?
Oh, absolutely. So let's take a look at the app that got created here, and we'll understand all the parts, and you can see where that comes from. You can see how you can change that. So first of all, like there's those three main pages that you see on the app, right? There's like home, the fetch data page, and the counter page, and those are implemented using Blazor components. Everything in Blazor is done with a component. Those top level pages are themselves components, and they're each implemented by these Razor files, these .cshtml files. So there's the counter page, there's fetch data, and there's the home page. And these pages are routable, like they're a page because they have this @page directive at the top. And that says that this particular component should handle requests to /counter. Similarly, for fetch data, this page should handle requests to the fetch data URL. And routing is set up in this app in the root component of the application, which is this app.cshtml. This is the root of all the components in the in my Blazor application. And you can see it only has a single component that it's using as part of the root app definition, and that is this router component. And what the router component does is we're pointing it right now at the assembly that's built for this app, and it will go looking through that assembly for components, and specifically components that have that @page directive, that have a route defined. And then it will handle then, as requests come in, calling the correct component based off of the address that you specified using the @page directive. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
And we should probably say
at least John is with me. All right,
it's slightly different to server-side ASP.NET routing in the sense that on the server, you just have this one global router, and that works perfectly good for server-side programming. But a very common pattern with client-side app frameworks is that you want to have lots of different routers that handle different parts of your application. And so expressing that as a component like this allows us to do that. Now, it's not fully implemented yet, but you will be able to have multiple routers and nest them and give them responsibility for different parts of your app. So it's just a different way of organizing that same concern, but it should be just as powerful and useful as server-side routing.
So Jamie on the chat has a question: how a Blazor component relates to a Razor page.
So that's a great question. So Blazor components are a little different. Like Blazor components are pieces of web UI. They are similar to stuff that you do on the server in that they're both using the Razor syntax. You're using C# and HTML to decide like what markup you want. But on the server, what's really happening is you're basically generating HTML effectively as a string, and then sending it down to the browser and having the browser render that HTML doing its normal thing. With Blazor components, it's actually different. We take the Razor files, these CSHTML files, and they just like on the server, they do get compiled into a class, and it's the class that basically has the compile functionality for generating the corresponding markup. But in Blazor, those classes get downloaded actually into the browser as a DLL. Whereas in the server side, you're downloading a string. With Blazor, you're actually downloading the compiled classes. And then client side in the browser, the Blazor runtime will ask components to render, and those components will render their markup using the logic that you specified into a rendering tree. And then Blazor's runtime will handle updating the DOM in the browser based off of that rendering tree. And as components change and they re-render themselves, it will diff the new rendering tree that the component just created with the current one and update the DOM accordingly, making it very efficient. So you're not touching the DOM too much. Like you're basically doing it as little as you can. So that's how it works. Does that help? Does that make sense?
It does. One question that kind of gets included in there is, and there's several questions coming in on chat, which is cool. One is Alan's asking if it's possible, like for him, it feels more natural to do routing in C# rather than use the Razor kind of, I guess, default routing. Is there a way to control, like, can you go in and control that and modify the routing if you want, if you're more comfortable with kind of standard routing?
You can. Yeah. So now, because we've got an outstanding pull request for this, which hasn't been merged yet. So as of this very moment, no. But when we finished with merging this pull request, you will be able to subclass the router if you want to, and then you can override the method that it uses to map a given URL to a component type, and you can put any logic you want in that. So you can build your own completely custom URL matching system if you want to. If for people who want a more high-level way of giving a list of URL patterns in regular C# code, we'll probably have a way of doing that as well, but it's not there just yet.
Cool. So one thing I want to show is how does that root component get wired up to the app. So this is the program CS file, and there's a static void main just like you would have in a console app. This is the entry point for the Blazor application, and you can see this is where the browser renderer for the app is being set up. And when you set this guy up, that's where you specify what you want the root component of the app to be. You can see here it's saying I want it to be app. Now the type name for the generated type for each of the Blazor components is based off of the file name. So the reason why we have an app type is because the file was named app.cshtml, and so the type that got generated out of it was, you know, public class app was the name of that type. Because similarly for the other components, like there's a counter class that will actually get generated from the counter.cshtml file. There'll be a fetch data class that gets generated from the fetch data CSHTML file. And then to finally get to your question originally, John, about like how do you customize that loading thing on the page? Well, notice again in that program CS file, not only is it specifying what you want the root component of the app to be, it's also saying where do you want to put it? Like what's the DOM selector of where you want that component to lie in the page, and the page where it will put it is in index.html, which is under the www folder. So you have to have this index.html file, and this is basically the page, right, for the app, and all the other pages that you see when you run it are being handled through client-side routing and navigations. So there's the loading text. You see it? See app? Yeah. There's the app element, and it just has loading inside of it. So that's the text that you're seeing while Blazor's getting itself up and running and getting the components rendered, and then it will replace this app element, or replace its content with the rendered output of the components.
Okay, cool.
Does that help? Some other interesting things that are happening in this file. So this file actually gets modified as part of the build of the Blazor app. Like you see, there's this script Blazor boot tag that's in this file. When you build the Blazor app, this script tag will actually get replaced. Like let me get it up and running again so we can hopefully see that. It'll get replaced with another script tag that references the a piece of JavaScript that's used to bootstrap the .NET runtime within the browser, and also to point it at the application's entry point. So let me see if we can dig around in here. This one, yeah. So you see this script tag here. So here it got that's the Blazor boot script that got replaced, and we replaced it with a reference to this blazor.js file, and this is what's going to get the WebAssembly code for the .NET runtime up and running. It also has the main entry point for the application. So there's the web application 2 is the DLL that was built from my project, and then it has all the references that are needed by the application. This is all the references that were specified as part of the compilation step, trimmed down to just the things that that we know are absolutely needed. So we actually do on every build IL stripping. We'll remove assemblies that aren't used and IL code from assemblies that aren't actually used at all. In fact, so if we go back to the app and try to build again, let me get the output up. Let's see if we can do a rebuild. We should see that. So if we watch the output spew by, hopefully we'll see, so running some linker thing and delete assembly. So there it's like pulling out all the stuff that my app doesn't actually need, and that helps reduce the size of the application payload and reduce load times. Now this is just sort of like
as you're saying that, reducing the load time. So Benjamin had just asked in the chat, how big is the Blazor.js request?
Yeah. Let's how big is the Blazor.js file?
Well, Yeah, I mean,
or the whole app. Like, presumably, he wants to know.
I think those are both good questions.
Yeah, I don't actually know how big the JS file. I think it's fairly small. Like, it's basically just starting the runtime and it has some of the wiring up. And it's 0 bytes transferred. It's 0 bytes. None.
Wow, that's web scale.
I don't know. The edge tools are interesting. Let me go to back to the matrix real quick. Okay, let's do it here just so I can feel a little bit better. And let's do the network tab. I think it's like 2-3 megs. Steve probably remembers off the top of his head.
I saw for which one? I saw
1.9 megs transferred.
Wow.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So
yeah, under 2.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at, and we still think honestly that's too big. Like I was saying, this was our sort of first draft of doing this optimizations. We have other optimizations that we do plan to do, and like we want to trim back. Like one of the big payloads here is actually the WebAssembly file itself. Like here's that's this one here. Mono.wasm is 1.7 megs uncompressed. We know there's a bunch of stuff in here that we probably don't need that we can trim out. There's also some more aggressive trimming of the rest of the BCL DLLs that we are pretty sure that we can do. We just haven't gotten around to it yet, because there's lots to implement still with Blazor. But that's at least a starting point, and to get people up and going. So there is IL trimming that's happening, and it happens on every build.
Yeah,
wow.
So it will certainly get quite a lot smaller than it is right now. The other thing to bear in mind is, of course, that this can all be cached as well on a per user basis. So for any given user, they're only going to pay that download cost once, and then they should just be a handful of bytes to load the application for any subsequent times.
Do I have to do anything special to mark those, like those DLLs that are being downloaded, to mark those as cacheable, or is that kind of handled automatically?
While I'm not promising how it works today, because we're still at 0.10, certainly the way this would be by the time this was 1.0 would be that no, you don't have to do anything. It would all be based on the actual contents of the DLLs. So whether that's with e-tags or with special generated file names or something like that. No, the developer would not have to think about that. It would just be cached forever based on the identity of the content.
Cool. So next, what I wanted to show is some of the tooling, because some of the tooling is pretty amazing. At least I think. I think it's super hot. Like, so how do you use a component is one question. Like this is the implementation of the counter component, and you can tell that it's a combination of markup, like HTML markup and C#. Here's all the functions block has the members of the component that we want to add, and any event handlers that we want to add. Like this increment count method is what's actually handling each button click. Okay, great.
Can you bump up your font size just a little bit?
I would be happy to. I apologize for that. Is that better?
Yep.
All right, cool. Okay, so now this will get turned into a class, and then how do you use that? Well, you use that using like HTML tag like syntax. So if we wanted to add like the counter component to the home page of this app, we can create another counter component instance. So let's do that. And you can see I'm getting awesome IntelliSense over the counter component name. So we get completions, and that lights up. And if we rerun the application, when you rerun, we don't have live reload set up yet. That's coming hopefully in the next update. So right now, when you want to update your application, you do have to just hit Control F5 again. That will rebuild, and that will rerun the application. Soon we will have live reload. We will just do that for you. But there, see, now I've got my own counter component on the home page, and I've got the one that's on the counter page itself. And then you can do things like parameterize your components, where you want the component to behave differently based off of arguments that you provide. To provide arguments to enable parameters for a component, you just need to add public properties. So for this counter component, for example, instead of having it count by ones, let's have the increment amount be something that we can specify. And let's say the default is going to be 1. So this is just a public property that I'm defining on the counter component. And then instead of just incrementing, let's increment it by the increment amount. All right, cool. And then in my home page, instead of incrementing by 1, let's do increment amount. See, I'm getting IntelliSense over the component parameter. So super nice tooling, honestly. Like I often feel like Blazor sort of writes itself for me. Like it just tells me like, here's the things that you need to write. So let's increment the one on the home page by 10, and we'll leave the one on the counter page alone. So it's still incrementing by 1. If we Control F5, we should now see that the one on the home page, there it goes. Yeah, this one's incrementing by 10. Woo! And then the one on the counter page still increments by 1. So that's how you can do component parameters. That's how you can do component arguments. And you get really nice IntelliSense inside of Visual Studio to help you do those things. Does that make sense?
It does. I've got more questions coming in, but I don't want to distract you too much too from.
Let me do a few more things, and then we'll try and leave a bunch of time for questions.
Awesome.
So layout. How do you do layout in Blazor? So layout is also handled through components. You basically author a layout component. We can see in our pages directory, there's a view imports file, and it's using this new @layout directive to say that I would like to use this main layout component for layout in my application. And where is that guy defined? Well, it's defined as a component in the CSHTML file. It happens to be in this shared folder. So here's the layout component implementation for my app. To implement a layout, what you need to do is you need to implement this interface, the iLayout component interface. And we're doing that using this Razor directive @implements, which basically allows you to specify additional interfaces that you want to implement on the generated class. And that interface basically has this single property, this body property, which allows you to then specify like where in the layout do you want all the child content to be rendered? Like where do you want the stuff that's being laid out to appear in the application? So that's how this is done. So here we're actually rendering the body of the layout on the page.
I just want to say one quick comment on that, because I think that it's a little bit easy to see, like to get a little worried about it and see like you're using these different components and all that kind of thing. But this is standard HTML, whereas like some people I've seen some people say like, oh, this is like Silverlight all over again or whatever. But this is using straight up standard, all the browser native stuff in the client, including like you've got Bootstrap classes there and stuff, right? This is just HTML.
Yeah, everything we do in Blazor is based off just plain old open standards. There's no plugins. There's no code transpilation happening. We're taking these CSHTML files, turning them into normal .NET classes, downloading them into the browser, and just running them on top of a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. And that's all just normal browser tech. We're not actually extending the browser in any particular way. Yeah. So and that's a goal, because we really hope that Blazor will appeal to as broad an audience of web developers as possible. And so the skills that around HTML and CSS, we want you to be able to continue to leverage those while giving you more productivity and ease of use and faster to get started using .NET and C# and great tooling in Visual Studio and great backend story with .NET Core and so forth.
So, and the component syntax you're using there, that's just the standard kind of Razor components I'm used to, right? I mean,
it's very similar to, like, it has some similarity to tag helpers. If you've used tag helpers in ASP.NET Core, in that you're defining basically a class that's being specified as a tag in your CSHTML files. But again, it's the components though are pretty different, because they're rendering to this render tree. They have state, whereas tag helpers are you server side to you basically spit out HTML as a string on the server. But the syntax does feel very familiar that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So that's how you write your layout. And this nav menu component, this is a component that's added in the app. This is what's defining that left nav, like this left nav over here. That's all being specified by this nav menu component. And you can see it's using some other built-in components that we give you. This nav link is a component that basically will change the class of, it will generate an anchor tag, and it will change the class of the anchor tag based on whether or not that's the current page that you're currently looking at. So we just have a bunch of nav links for each of the pages in the app, and that's how that's all done. So that's implementing with components, that's using them, that's the tooling, and hopefully we think this is enough for people to get started with building some interesting stuff. And we've actually seen people already do that, like build some pretty cool things. And I wanted to show some of the apps that people have been building on top of just this fairly basic set of initial infrastructure. Let's see what we got here. So this was an app that I found a couple days ago. Someone was playing around with Blazor, and they decided to write a little app that lets you search through the lyrics in this database, VocaDB, which I guess is lyrics for Vocaloid songs. Vocaloid? I never heard of Vocaloid before. Do you guys know what Vocaloid is?
No idea.
No idea. So Vocaloid apparently is a style of music where the singing is all synthesized. Like you basically feed the lyrics and the music into a computer program, and then it will sing for you.
Wow.
Yeah, apparently it's fairly popular in some countries, and there are like whole CDs, like albums of music that are all done using Vocaloid technology. And this person decided to build a little database of all of those, the lyrics from all of those songs. So that's this app, and this is a Blazor app. You can browse it. And what was like one of the songs? I don't know Vocaloid songs. So if you're a Vocaloid fan, I apologize, but I think one of the songs that they say is in here is this Nebula song. And so you can search, and it gives you the Japanese, the Romanized, and English versions of the song. So that was kind of fun. That's cool. Another one. This was really interesting. So there's apparently this project called Real World. You can find it by going to realworld.io. And what this is it's an app. It's basically a clone of the medium.com blog engine, but it's re-implemented the back end and the front end using as many technologies as they could. So like for the front end, like they have implementations of this app in all of these frameworks. For the back end, they have implementations of the back end using all of these frameworks. And I think ASP.NET Core is on this list as well. And then you can like mix and match. Like you could say like, well, what would it be like if I had like a React front end with a Happy.js back end, I guess. So that's pretty cool. And someone looked at this and they said, well, let's do a Blazor port of the front end. And so that's this gentleman here. So he has a fork where he's set this up. I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm not gonna try saying it. But this is his fork, and he went ahead and published it live. So this is a live version of the app running on Azure, and it's quite functional. So it's pretty cool. So this is basically like a little medium blog post engine implemented in Blazor. So you can check that out. This was an app that actually got done. We had a hackathon a little bit before the Blazor release, where we had a bunch of people like try out the Blazor bits. And one guy built a DNS Whois client in Blazor. And I think this one's even before we did IL trimming. So it's a little bit beefier than the other applications, but it works. So I don't know, like ASP.NET, I think is one of the domains. Yeah, so they're just updated ASP.NET. So you can query for domains and who owns what. This is all implemented in Blazor. I think he originally had implemented this in Angular. So he did a port from Angular to Blazor and did that. There were actually other fun things that they did at that hackathon that unfortunately I don't have the demo code for, but several people tried out JavaScript interop. From Blazor apps, you can call into any JavaScript library or any browser API because WebAssembly code supports a JavaScript interop layer. And so there was one set of folks that they wrote a Blazor app that had like a light meter. They plugged into the ambient light sensor API in the browser and built like a Blazor light meter that like would go up and down depending on how bright the light was. So that was being seen by the laptop. They also did a demo using the geolocation APIs in the browser. So cool stuff with JavaScript interop. And this was fun too. This is a tweet that I saw a little while back. This guy has like a little, you can see it's a little Christmas tree down here, a little electronic Christmas tree that he controls with a Raspberry Pi that he implemented an interface for using Blazor and also using Wii.wasm. If you haven't heard of Wii, I know a lot of people when they see Blazor, if they come from like a WPF or Silverlight background or Xamarin Forms background, they often ask us like, "Are you going to do XAML?" And the answer for Blazor is no. Like we don't plan to do XAML support for Blazor, but that doesn't mean someone isn't going to do it. And in fact, some guy in the community he had already taken Xamarin Forms and wrote like a basically like a he set up a WebSocket channel between the browser and the server, and basically allowed you to take Xamarin Forms apps and run them in the basically server side, but where you had a lot of the interactions happening client side in the browser, and then tunneling the events to the server through this WebSocket channel. And he saw what we had done with Blazor and with the WebAssembly-based .NET runtime, and he said, "Oh, well, maybe we could do that for this as well." And so he took his Xamarin Forms implementation and replatted it on top of the same runtime, and that's this Wii project. And I have to admit, every time I see it, I always want to say "ooh," but it's pronounced Wii, and it's pretty cool. So if you're interested in XAML and particularly Xamarin Forms with WebAssembly and running in the browser, definitely check out his project. He's done some really good stuff. But yeah, there's a basically Blazor controlling a Raspberry Pi to control a Christmas tree. So that was kind of neat. So if you want to get started with Blazor, you probably are curious about docs. I did show you the blog post, and there's a bunch of content in the blog post. Unfortunately, we don't have official docs yet, though, for Blazor. But the community was kind enough to step in and help us out there. This learn-blazor.com is a site that's been put up by a guy named Rainer Stropek, I think is his last name, Stropek. And he's got a lot of great content on here about how to do things in Blazor, including like if you want to mess around with JavaScript interop, he's got a whole page on that. He's got stuff about how data binding works and how you can implement components in Razor or in C#. So lots of good content here. We will have our own official docs, by the way. We're just trying to implement Blazor and get the docs out at the same time. But in the meantime, the community is helping us out. There was also this guy, I think is Chris Saintly, who did this Blazor Bytes blog post series where he went through a lot of the Blazor infrastructure as well. So there's content out there. If you're stuck, you're trying to figure out how to do something, there are people in the community that are helping out there. And thank you for you guys that have been doing that. That's tremendously helpful and much appreciated. Also, if you're still stuck and you need help, definitely come and find us on Gitter. You can chat with us there, or if you want to, you can post on Stack Overflow. I know people have been helping each other out with Blazor questions on Stack Overflow. If you have feedback on the product, I don't know if you noticed, but on the homepage of the app, yeah, right here, we actually put a little a Blazor component in that has a link to a SurveyMonkey survey, and this is super helpful for us. If you like Blazor, or even if you don't, like if you just have feedback about Blazor, I shouldn't qualify it. If you want to give feedback on what Blazor is, install it, run the app, click on the link, and fill out the survey. And this data, we've had several hundred people that have already done this, which is just great. Like the feedback that we're getting through this thing has been really helpful for us to set the direction for the product, figure out what we need to work on. So take this survey if you're looking for an avenue to give feedback and help out with this experimental phase. Or of course, you can always open up issues on GitHub, and a lot of people have been doing that. And even we've gotten some really great pull requests there as well.
Just a side note, as you're going through all these links, I'm copying them all down here, and so I'll share those along with the links for the community links at the beginning. Perfect.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people have questions about roadmap. Like, what are we doing next? And let me pull up my notes here so I don't miss any stuff here. So for the roadmap, I think we should do this. Okay. For the roadmap, we are trying to get a Blazor update out about every 2 weeks is what we're shooting for. We're trying to move fast. So 0.2 of Blazor, we're going to try and get that out about 2 weeks after the 0.1 release, which will be around April 9th. Now, I'm giving dates here. Everything here, of course, is subject to change. Like we're going as fast as we can. This is sort of our goal, but to give you a feel for how Blazor will progress over the next month or two, this is what we're currently planning on doing. So 0.2 April 9th roughly, 0.3 we hope to get out around the week of April 23rd, then 0.4 May 7th is about when we're planning to do that. And then at that point, we will take stock of where we're at. We'll look at all the survey data that we've gotten. We'll look at how many people have installed and what they're saying about the product and what we have found the technical issues to be, and we'll figure out what the future looks like at that point. So those are the releases that we currently have planned. 0.2 is already in the works. Things that we have planned to come for 0.2. Live reload is being worked. Is it already in, Steve? Is it mostly in? Halfway in?
The command line builds now automatically trigger live reloads. The Visual Studio ones do not yet, but I've implemented it. I just need to make a final bit of tweak to the pull request based on some code review feedback, and then I'll merge that tomorrow morning.
Sweet. So almost done. So live reload's coming. Support for component libraries. So what this is we want you to be able to take your CSHTML files, your Blazor component implementations, and stick them in a class library and be able to reference them from other Blazor apps and be able to easily reuse them. You can kind of do that today, but it requires a bit of manual labor. We want to make that experience really slick for our next release. So that's one of the themes that we're targeting for 0.2. Tooling for VS for Mac. So this is aspirational. We're going to try and do this. VS for Mac just released a preview with Razor editing support not that long ago, like I think just like a week ago. It's the same. It's basically the same infrastructure that's used in VS on Windows. So we're going to try and get the Blazor tooling working on top of the latest VS for Mac preview and get an MPAC out for people who develop on a Mac, so that you can get the same IntelliSense and completions working there. If everything goes perfectly smoothly, this will happen. If not, then it may take longer, but we'll get it out as soon as we can, because we want to have a cross-platform tooling story as well. Ryan's been working on getting support for conditional attributes in. This is so you can really nicely in Razor syntax specify that an attribute should only be present based off of some condition. We've also done a fairly major reworking of the bind syntax for 0.2. If you're interested in learning about the details of that, before we actually ship, Ryan wrote up a pretty nice summary of the changes in this GitHub issue. This is Blazor issue 409, so you can look through here. Basically, what's going to happen here is the syntax will change from being at bind to a bind or bind dash syntax, which will enable quite a bit more flexibility. Like right now, there's quite a few limitations with bind. Like you can only bind to certain events. We have some limitations around tooling with it. With the new syntax, it's a lot more flexible, a lot more powerful, and aligns well with the Razor-based tooling that we're doing. Other things that are that actually the community has been helping us out with that we hadn't really. We were like, we know we need to do this, but we don't think we're going to get to it. And then the community jumped in and said, well, we'll do it for you. We'll be moving to Bootstrap 4 in our templates. SVG support, we had some issues with that in the 0.1 release. The community stepped in and has helped us out with that. So you can have SVG content in your components. There have been several serialization improvements around JSON that got added for 0.2. And we are planning to have templates available that work with the latest preview of ASP.NET Core 2.1. So those are the things that are planned for 0.2. Nothing really to report yet for 0.3 or 0.4, but we do have a GitHub project that you can look at our backlog, and feel free to thumbs up or +1 issues that you think are important, and that helps us prioritize. So that's the plan. That's the roadmap.
Couple of quick questions on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing is, the last thing on the list there, the templates for ASP.NET Core 2.1. So that means this is mostly for the back end.
Exactly. So right now, when you create like an I guess I didn't even show it because we didn't have quite enough time. But if I created the other template, the ASP.NET Core hosted template. Actually, let me see if I can create one real fast. So this and that. And let's, instead of doing just Blazor standalone, let's do Blazor ASP.NET Core hosted. This will give you 3 projects. It'll give you a client project, which is the Blazor app. This is just the same project that you saw previously. Excuse me. And then there's a server app. This is an ASP.NET Core application. And in this case, it actually has like an ASP.NET Core controller with a web API in it. And this is what's actually serving the weather forecast data in this app. In the other app, it was just like a static JSON file. Here, it's actually a controller. And then there's a shared project that's referenced by both the client and the server. And this is just a .NET standard class library where you can put like your domain objects, code that you want to share between the client and the server. This server project is based currently on ASP.NET Core 2.0, and we just need to do the template work to give you a 2.1 version. So that if you want to try it out with 2.1 features, you can. So that's
that thing you've got there, by the way, with the shared class library is a big deal, I think, as an application developer, because that's often frustrating for me when I've got back-end classes in C#, front-end classes in JavaScript. I've got to do validation sometimes in JavaScript and sometimes in C#. I've got to do conditional logic, blah, blah, blah. It's great to be able to have like a shared class where I can put that in one place and reuse it. Like that's a great code reuse story for me.
Yeah, super useful. And in fact, I didn't show this. This is a sample app that we have in the ASP.NET samples repo on the ASP.NET org. This is called Flight Finder. Let me run this real quick. This is a sample that Steve kindly put together. It's kind of like a mini travel website where you're like searching for flights. It's a little bit more involved than the template. So it's if you're looking for a beefier app to try out, this is a good one to experiment with. So you can search for flights, and you can add, if you find one that you like, you can add it to your short list, and you can remove them and so forth. This app is using that same 3 project structure. Like it has the Blazor client, which has a whole bunch of interesting components in it that you definitely should check out. It's got some higher level components in here, like this gray out zone component actually will capture components as that are children of this component, and will depending on whether this gray out property is true or false, it will layer like a gray, translucent gray overlay on top of the component. That's what you're seeing whenever I do a search. You can see it turns gray in the search area. That's using that gray out component, and then it renders its child components using this child content property. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, it has that server project and the shared app, and the shared library. And you can see it has a whole bunch of code that it's sharing between the client and server, so that the data transfer objects match on both sides of the wire and so forth. So definitely play with this guy. This is pretty fun. That's in the samples repo. So you go to GitHub, ASP.NET samples, and then if you dig into the samples folder and look for Blazor, there you'll find the Flight Finder sample. Cool.
Cool. Wow.
I know we're almost at the hour, so and I said we do a full show, but I can't quite go over. But I do want to answer questions. I know you said there were a bunch of questions. What can we help people out with?
There's a lot of questions. There's a question here.
If we don't get your questions answered here, come join us on Gitter later today. We will try and get them answered there, or people in the community can also help out. But go ahead. Yes.
I'll try and cherry pick some. So one asked, which browsers support Blazor?
So all the modern browsers support Blazor. So Firefox, Edge, Chrome, they all Safari, they all have full support for WebAssembly. We do have fallback support to ASM.js, which is an older tech that should enable working in browsers that don't yet have WebAssembly support. It doesn't work yet completely in IE. Like if you care about IE support, it doesn't work there yet because we haven't actually added the polyfills that enable some of the JavaScript stuff that we're using to work in IE. But we know we can get it to work. We just haven't done that yet. So right now, if you're playing around with Blazor 0.1, Edge, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, those all work fine.
Including mobile devices as well.
Yes.
Wow.
Has Apple fixed its mobile Safari bug yet? Has that been addressed? I know they when they did their Spectre and Meltdown fixes, they destroyed their WebAssembly support in the mobile browser. I don't know if they fixed that yet. So if you hit an issue on iPhone, it may be because of that known issue, but I assume they plan to fix it at some point.
Yeah, they fixed it 5 days ago when iOS 11.3 was released.
Oh, sweet. Okay, great. So recently.
Okay. Questions in here. Let me see. One's asking about things like the nav link. Is that doing a refresh, or is that all just browser-based navigation?
Browser-based navigation. That's all client-side routing.
Very cool.
Yeah. And well, it depends on what the URL you're pointing to. Right?
Yeah, thanks.
If it's within your application, it's a client-side navigation. If it's an external URL, of course, it's just a normal browser.
Yeah, remember the nav link is just a component that generates an anchor tag, and then a class, depending on whether the current page you're on matches the URL. So if that anchor tag happens to point to something that's only on the server, then it'll do a server-side navigation.
Gosh. Okay. Well, there's other questions just for people that didn't hear you clearly at the beginning. This is asking, is it ready? Is it out? Is it what's it? So this is an experimental project. All those disclaimers important to remember.
It's an experiment. It is available as a preview that you can install today, and you should. You need to go get the latest .NET Core Preview SDK. You need to go get the latest preview of Visual Studio, which installs side by side with your existing stable version. If you can't do that on your machine for whatever reason, you can go get a VM on Azure or set up a VM yourself. And then you want to install the Blazor language service V6 Visual Studio extension on top of VS to get the tooling and the templates. And you can do that today. It is a preview, of course. It is alpha bits. This is an experiment. Don't go using this for a production app yet, or planning to use it for a production app. But please play around with it and give us feedback, because that helps us know in what direction to take Blazor.
Okay. One other interesting question, is it possible to do a PWA with Blazor?
Yes, it's absolutely possible. The experience is a bit raw right now. So, I mean, PWA is basically involved using a bunch of functionality provided by the browser, and you can use anything that the browser can do from Blazor through the JavaScript interop layer. So if you write enough code, yes, you can do it. Of course, we'd like to make that experience really nice and seamless and provide .NET API wrappers for all the things that you care about. We haven't done that work yet. It's on our backlog. We envision maybe at some point we'll have a Blazor PWA template that has a bunch of stuff wired up for you to get you up and going. It's on our radar. It's possible today, but the experience is pretty raw right now.
Okay. One last question. You mentioned some of the things that are like checked in or not, that like are nightlies that are not even part of the 2-week cadence release. If people want to run that locally, can they like git clone the repo and run locally, or is that kind of a nightmare?
It's not a nightmare. It requires work, and you know, it's your mileage may vary depending on the current state of the build. We do have a mygit feed with v6 builds and the package builds. That is, let me, so .NET mygit.org, Blazor dev. Blazor-dev is our mygit feed. And here we have like the nightly builds of the packages. You can see there's 0.2 builds here, and the v6 is down here at the bottom as well. Do not use, we should take, Steve, we should remove this Razor language service v6. Do not use this one. Get the latest Visual Studio preview, and it has what you need from the Razor language service, but you do want the Blazor language service. There is a way in VS to set up other feeds for Visual Studio extensions, so you can install this v6 feed, this v6 from the mygit feed. And again, these are nightly builds, so mileage may vary. You can also build the repo yourself. That does involve messing around with like Preview 2 versions of the .NET Core SDK. Some people have stumbled over that a bit. That should get easier in a few weeks when the .NET Core 2.1 SDK gets updated. But yeah, those things are possible. It's just a little bit more work. And you know, these are nightly builds, so the quality is untested. No promises on how well it will work. We need to get instructions up on the site on how to do that, and it's on my plate to do. I will try and get those up later this week.
Okay, cool. We're over time, so I'll let you go. This is awesome. I could talk about this all day, and I'm sure from the chat other people could too. So.
Feel free to find us on Gitter. We're on the Gitter. I'm on the Gitter chat room at least once or a few times a day. And there's lots of people there as well that are pretty involved with the project already. And I'm sure many of them could help you out as well if one of us isn't already on there.
Okay, we have one more important thing, which is dramatic zoom out.
Oh.
So you need to stop sharing your screen.
Stop sharing my screen. That means I got to go back to the matrix, right? And no.
Yeah.
And then whatever, like this.
And yep.
And then hang up. Did that work?
It did work.
Okay. So now you ready?
Yes. Zoom out, it's so dramatic.